Much quicker one this time. We'll get into why, but there was an event hosted at the Wargamers Guild over in New Jersey. So let's talk about the list that performed well there. So as per usual, we'll talk a little bit about the details. My wife and I were able to attend this event. There were 31 players that were slinging cards trying to take down this showdown. Now, we had a modified format, so there were only 3 rounds of Swiss. For all of you out there that are already getting your pitchforks and torches, allow me to explain. So normally for that large of an event, you'd want 5 rounds. In this case, it was only 3 because that left us with 4 undefeated players. Those 4 undefeated players then went on to play in a single elimination playoff to determine who the champion was. I did reach out to the organizers. They were able to get me 3 of the 4 deck lists. So those are the ones that we're going to talk about today. So the first one up in what's becoming a recurring theme is Han Solo. Now this one is electing for R2-D2 and C-3PO as compared to some of the other lists that we've seen that are skipping them in favor of either other early drops or squeezing in numbers for other things. Now this appears, I don't know for sure because I didn't speak with the player, but it appears to be a somewhat budget list only featuring a single Millennium Falcon in the main deck. Presumably they would run the full set if they had the opportunity, but I'm not sure. Given the space freed up by that, there's an extra Admiral Akbar, course, helps stabilize aggro matchups, and it appears that this player really wanted to ensure that they were not losing against aggro, including Gamorrean guards. Now, that is probably overkill in my opinion, but I'm not a Han player. Let me know, Han players, if you feel that this is going too far. I always thought that aggro was a favorable matchup for this list, but in this case, I think it absolutely is. Only 2 Spark of Rebellions. I feel like you want the 3rd if you're going to run it, but I could see shaving a number there. Beyond that, we only have a Singleton Rogue Squadron Skirmisher. We've seen various numbers of that in these lists, but also Cool Tech is 97th Legion. I don't know if this was the player that got kind of demolished in a game by Force Lightning, but I absolutely heard someone exclaim that that happened to them. It's probably not a good feeling being on that end. Other than that, we get Reinforcement Walkers, Chewies, and kind of the usual stuff that you'd expect. Notably, only a single Traitorous between main and board, and it happens to live in the board. So this player clearly had certain things they were targeting in mind. Now, in second place, we actually have yet another Han. I am starting to wonder, at least for my local events, maybe I just need to play hard to control because there's a lot of Hans that have been doing well the last couple weeks. Maybe this is a meta choice where, and I talked about it in a previous video, that the first week of Showdowns, everybody was expecting a ton of aggro to perform well, or for a number of people to play aggro because we had the Vader wins with control in the previous weeks. This week seems to be a reaction to that with a lot of mid-rangey decks performing well and just crushing what's presumably legions of aggro. And maybe next week we're going to see control. So maybe to jump ahead of the curve, go aggro. You don't want to get too many layers ahead. But either way, this list is closer to some of the other ones we've seen before where it's got a full set of Leias. It's running Vanguard Ace, notably only 2 Ezras as opposed to 3. Chewbacca's in the main full play set of Home 1. Surprise attacks and waylays also in there alongside Traitorous in order to help try and stabilize. Now, in the board, there's actually some incredibly spicy things here. In the board, we're actually seeing Prepare for Takeoff. This lets you search the top 8 cards of your deck for 2 vehicles. Now, the Han list, due to the ramp and, of course, vehicles kind of being on the higher end cost-wise. Actually, I don't know if that's actually true because we do have some expensive units, but anyway, we'll just go with it and say that vehicles are the more costly of the 2 unit types. And there's certainly a lot of things to search for because finding a Home 1 or finding any of the other pieces, whether it could be Bright Hope, it could be the Skirmisher, it could be whatever, you're not going to complain about drawing those extra cards. And ramp decks can, especially Han, run out of gas where you expend everything in your hand in order to get ramped, but then you don't have anything to play after you've ramped. It's a pretty cool tech that I haven't seen before. I'd be curious what decks that came in against specifically. Presumably not aggro. Maybe you don't have time to play it. So against control to find the other gas. I could definitely see it. Bodhi Rooks and Reinforcement Walkers, yeah, we've seen those before. Syndicate Lackeys, once again, making an appearance, definitely helps stabilize against a number of different matchups. Now, the winner here, oddly enough, despite the Hans seeming to prey on aggro and other mid-range preying on aggro, we actually see Sabine taking everything down. Now, this is Sabine Green as compared to Blonde Sabine or Mono Red Sabine, which have, of course, been making the rounds and making their presence felt. Here, we're seeing a slight variation. We're getting double Zeb and trimming a Steadfast Battalion. We've seen that particular modification show up in other lists or different variations thereof. Only 2 R2-D2s instead of the full set. Beyond that, mostly pretty standard. You got to find room somewhere, so we're shaving Bright Hopes, obviously shaving the aforementioned R2-D2, and shaving a Heroic Sacrifice. This player is willing to give up some points in the control matchup, but admittedly, aggro should probably dominate there anyway. Now, there is a full playset of General Dodona, which is pretty cool. Definitely will help you stabilize in those mirrors, ensure that your team is living where theirs is not. Now, in the board, we once again get some really, I don't want to say wacky stuff because that makes it sound a little too silly, but definitely some abnormal options compared to what you typically see. Disabling Fangfighter, sure. Bright Hope, yeah, that makes sense. Steadfast, well, we shaved one from the main. U-Wing, that's been a common thing within Sabine lists, especially in the board. But Academy Training is not something that I think I've seen in a deck list ever. So I'd be very interested to hear where this comes in. Hypothetically, I could see it coming in mirrors or similar other aggro mirrors, because then your body is bigger than theirs. And then it possibly generates additional value. But if you're trading 2 for 2 because you ran into their guy and then ate their guy with the Academy Training and then they run back into it, and then I don't know how advantageous that happens to be. Or against control, maybe it puts things out of range. So, for example, you put that on your Sabine, now it can't be hit with takedown. So basically, is it an extra set of wing leaders? I could see that. My concern, of course, would be getting 2 for 1 as the player with the Academy Training, because you're going to play it and then they're immediately going to remove it, hypothetically. But that requires maybe a Vanquish, because just about everything else will then be out of make it opening range, possibly out of takedown range, possibly even out of open fire range, depending on what you're playing against. So it's interesting, and I'd love to hear what those came in against. So that's the quick recap. Like I said, this was kind of a modified event. As I understand it, FFG didn't give very firm instructions as to what the format should or should not be. It's up to the stores to determine what is best for them. So it was cool to see this slightly different format. Shout out to all the players and congratulations to everybody who topped this particular event. Like I've said before, if you've got other showdowns that maybe you want to get your name up in lights because you top 8'd or won, hit me up in Discord. The link for that and, of course, my live stream are in the description of this video. But as always, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And tune in next time for more Random's Thoughts.